Hello and welcome to my first episode of my e-bike build. But to be more accurate, it's an e-moped build, with moped being what is applicable on the good old British moped specifications, with the updated spec for electric vehicles because it doesn't have a engine, it has a motor, so electric specs. Now I should say that I've not had any experience of moped building. I have not had a moped in over 50 years, which is quite a long time. My last one would have been at the age of 16 and I'm now currently 57. I've had a few motorcycles, but even then my last one was maybe 35 years ago, and I hate to admit it to being the old Honda 250 Super Dream. The dream part of the name refers to if you thought you were going fast, you were dreaming, because it was as slow as a slug. So, am I a born again biker with all the gear and no idea? Well, not exactly. I went to cars, minibuses and vans, and during all that time I stayed with, and don't laugh, bicycles. Cheap store-bought mountain bikes. So I've never left two wheels, I just didn't have an engine, making me an even slower and easier target to hit for the idiots behind wheels. Around 2012 I built my first e-bike. Back then the laws were slightly different and enforcement of the law was a bit different, so you could build anything and no one would know what it was. No one would know its power, no one would know its speed, so you could overbuild, and provided you rode it and being a sensible rider, no one ever bothered you. I never broke speed limits that were applicable when on the road, but I know off-road I could easily achieve 32-34 mile an hour from my old silver bike. It was great for shopping. Here's a picture of it with 2 rolls of black carpet just before a 4-mile ride back home. It started as a 500 watt 36 volt kit, but I ran it overvolted to 66 volts. I had 2 years of fun out with that bike until its controller failed. I was going to repair it, but 2 years later it was thrown out, although I still have the wheel and the controller. This is the only bike I had that could breach the e-bike speed power limits. I never took great pleasure in seeing yobs on 50cc mopeds and then seeing them behind me, as they were restricted to 27-28 mile an hour. So, wanting that feeling again, and something that isn't restricted to the current e-bike pedal assist limits of 15 miles an hour, I decided I had to be legal and above board, not to mention being a good boy. So this would mean building a full-on e-moped or an e-motorcycle. I chose moped, and I bet you're slapping your heads and saying, why? Well, the reason is this: I have to pay insurance. A moped is cheaper to insure. Second, at the time of starting this build, I thought my driving licence covered me for a moped of 50cc size, but apparently I could have gone with a build for a 125cc small motorcycle. Didn't know that then. My third reason, range. I'll be using it for journeys of 20 to 30 miles from home at the very most, so there's no need to have something really big to do that. Finally, number 4, I live in the city. Most trips will be to the shops and stores that are in the city, and in my city nothing moves faster than a bicycle anyway. It's just constant gridlock in the daytime. Yes, I can do the old filtering thing, which would allow me to be more efficient through the traffic, but if you're stopping and starting in a congested city, filtering with the traffic, the smaller moped can fit in spaces better than a slightly larger motorcycle. So that was my design brief. An all-electric, commuter-centric moped. Nothing too sporty, but nothing too 1970s. And the first thing I had to find was a frame. It had to be commuter bike sized. Having heard to register a new bike with a DVSA and DVLA, you need parts to be more than 75% new to get an age-rated number plate. Now what that means is, if it's all built from new and you can prove it, and you build it in 2024, then you get a registration plate on the back that starts with 24. If you can't prove this, then you get a plate that starts with a Q. Now Q is the number plates that the DVLA issue to vehicles that have been built from other scrap vehicles. It's not a bad thing, doesn't really matter, but it just means because it's built from multiple scrap vehicles, you can't prove how old it is because they're all of a different age. But if you buy all the parts new, then you can have the 24 plate. The other issue with the Q plate is insurance. Insurance companies, and dare I even say the police, when they see that it's a Q plate, they don't think it's been built out of differing age scrap parts. They think it's built out of differing age stolen parts. And so you have trouble with the insurance and you have trouble with the police stopping you more often. So I didn't want a Q plate, so I didn't want to buy second-hand parts. So everything new, keep the receipts. Now around the time I started building this, one popular frame for people building higher powered and not entirely street legal e-bikes was the Stealth Bomber frame. Now as you can see from these pictures here of Stealth Bomber built bikes, anything built on this frame isn't stealth. It's really damn obvious it's not a 250 watt e-bike bought from a bicycle shop. And it's also obvious it's not a normal built e-motorcycle from a big company like, I don't know, do Honda make them? Don't know. But it doesn't look professional. So it's not stealth by any measure of the word that I can think of. But one thing it reminded me of, the geometry of it reminded me of the old 1980s Honda XL range of bikes, especially the XL 250R. I had one of those for a year or so. It was an unreliable piece of shit, with a top speed of about 65 miles an hour. And if you'd spent your day trespassing in the local woods with it, with the police behind you, you kind of found out soon that 60 odd miles an hour just wasn't fast enough. So they weren't very good for anything really. So, I've ordered one of these Stealth Bomber frames off eBay. It's come nicely in a box. So I've ordered some forks, which were too short. Ordered some more forks, which were too short. And ordered some more forks, which then fit it just fine. By which time I thought the three bears were about to come home. Now I had to decide on the wheels. The back end was going to be a hub motor. I had checked the MSVA regs for building a moped and it said maximum power 4 kilowatt and restricted to 28 miles an hour. The 28 mile an hour wasn't a worry, you can restrict that in the electronics and the motor's controller. And if I buy a motor that says it's under 4 kilowatt, then I can safely be compliant with that specification they have as well, instead of trying to buy a motor that's say 10 kilowatt and restrict it to 4. If I just buy one that's 4 or under, they'll, that ticks the box. So I decided on a MXUS 3K Turbo. It's a fairly average performing hub motor with pretty standard bearing sizes for if ever they need replacing, and also they're currently on to the Mark II versions of this, which has thicker motor cables and a second set of hall sensors in case the motor gets a bit too hot. That can often stop the hall sensors working, so having a second set is handy. A lot of people do push these motors above the 3 kilowatt rating. It's not a worry. As I said, it has to be restricted to 28 miles an hour. And unless I'm doing time trials up hill climbs, this motor is going to be everlasting running at that speed. So it's better to over-engineer it than it is to have to walk home. Now the motor came in a 16-inch wheel. I had already done some measuring, mock-up drawings, checking of angles, try to come to a wheel size that would fit the ride height that I wanted. The fixed steering geometry, big word, of the headstock being welded in as part of the frame, and with the length of the forks that I'd got, everything seemed about right for 18-19 inch wheels. Or maybe it'd be better if I went, you know, one slightly larger on the front, but after checking, a 19 front wouldn't fit what I had to work with for the forks. So that was to be an 18 to like it or not, and you can't have a rear that's larger than your front, otherwise it just looks odd and silly. So it was going to be 18 front and back, and that way I only have to have one size of spare tyre and one size of spare tube and everything. So that gets me frame sorted, the motor sorted, and the wheels and forks sorted. So next we have to look at the lights. For the MSVA, all the lights have to be stamped with an E number to conform to the lighting regulations. And after buying 2 headlights off eBay that said E marked, but when they were delivered had no obvious markings, I ended up buying a used headlight from some cheap brand Moped and modified it to fit my forks and frame. I was thinking this is eating into my 100% new budget rule, but no one's ever going to know it's just a headlight glass. I don't even know where it came from. So no one else is going to be able to say, oh, that's not new. I decided to do the same for the rear light, and I bought an LED one for a KTM Duke, which was new damaged stock and cost me a whopping 5 beer tokens. I didn't need the mounting pins that were a bit mangled for the KTM mudguard, as I don't have a KTM mudguard, so that was a win for me. The indicators I purchased were generic eBay cheap indicators, LED style and terrible build quality. So now I need to look at the switchgear for the handlebars. eBay again to the rescue, and on there I had a choice of lots of different styles. But I decided to go with the generic one size fits all chrome switches because they look like just the real thing and seem to be an old style and looked well built, possibly from 1960s plastic. At least it looked like they were made out of Bakelite. A horn were next on my shopping list, and while I could have gone modern and electronic, I went with an old mechanical cheap car horn. It will do the job, and it will pass the eventual test at the DVSA, whereas the loudness of an electronic horn might be questioned, so it made sense to pick something that wouldn't cause issues on the test. So we have all the parts to build a working bike, minus the electronics. In the next episode I'll start the build of the rolling chassis and the battery, so I hope you have enjoyed the start of this, which has not had much of a build start or build content for a build video, but at this stage we now have everything to make it possible. We'll progress more in the next instalment, and thanks for making it this far. Please subscribe, please leave a comment. One I'm often asked is, how much does all this cost? Well, I'm going to put a beer token counter at the top of the screen, and then we can see how scary it gets before it's finished, because even I don't know how much I've spent so far. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe so you can catch up on the next one, and bye for now.
If that doesn't kill me first. Bill! Yeah.